after that to, well, make sure that we can share our perspectives and hear from you about what your questions might be as it relates to the world of higher education. So with that, it looks like we are going to get rolling only about 3 minutes late. The bad news is that we are still social isolating. The good news is parking for this event was free. So I want to thank all of our presenters for joining us. I also want to thank you guys in Zoom land for tuning in. And a special thanks to Tiffany and Meha for helping organize this. We've got a really great turnout for a Monday night. And we're going to get started actually, we're going to get started right away here. So I'm going to take it away with having Representative Jaquez Lewis just talk a little bit about her perspectives on things. I want to thank her for joining us, and then we'll get into our presentation.
Great, yes, thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everyone tonight. Very important topic with higher education. We tried to come up with some wonderful resources for not only students, but if you're faculty and staff, hang on to the end. We've got some resources for you also. And I think we can go ahead and start with the first slide if you'd like, Tiffany, if that would work. How about the next one? We're getting there. There we go, perfect. So I get to be the bearer of bad news, unfortunately. Obviously we will have to come up with a state budget. The state legislature is hitting pause right now. We look to be coming back sometime towards the end of May, maybe right after the midway May. We will immediately will have to work on the state budget. Normally our state budget would have been around 13 billion. And this covers K through 12, everything you see there, higher education, Medicaid, human services. But we know we will have to take at least a $2 billion hit because of what is happening with our state economy. We can't raise our taxes because of Tabor, so budgets will be cut. We're guessing department budgets will be cut about 25%. That will just set the stage. Again, if we didn't have Tabor, which is unique to Colorado, we could possibly raise taxes and try to create revenue. So before I bring on Dr. Paccione, I wanted to say, again, for faculty and staff, hang on at the end. We've got some special information for you, and thank you for being here tonight. Angie, you're up next, I think.
All right. Thank you. Oh, we can probably pass over the bio part. So, whoops, it should be another, there we go. So my name is Angie Paccione. I am the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Higher Education. We oversee, if you will, we're not a governing body, but we do work with all of the public institutions of higher education and 85 of the private degree granting institutions, half of which are religious based, and then nearly 300 private occupational schools. So these are schools that provide certificates or some degrees as well, but in things like cosmetology or truck driving, or lots of occupations. And so typically 1 to 2 year certificates. So in that capacity, of course, we are, I don't see anything on the screen, but we can go to the next slide. We are responding to COVID-19, which has impacted everyone practically on the planet, and it's unprecedented. And so it's also impacting higher education. As we know, we have moved to all remote delivery of instruction, but more than just the instructional part of it is the campus part of it. And so our campuses are virtually empty, only the essential staff. And most people go to college, whether it's 2-year or 4-year, for part of that, the vibe, if you will, of being on a campus and what that feels like. And so we're trying to make those adjustments, creating communities, remote communities and virtual communities. And one of the very first things that we did to respond to the overwhelming need that students have for the technology It's very difficult to participate in remote education and online learning if you don't have a laptop. And so we created a campaign called No Laps in Learning. And it is a way to have people make donations of laptops or donations of dollars so that we can go purchase laptops. There was initially a need between 1,200 and 1,500 laptops, and we are able to, just learned this morning, about 700 laptops that we have been able to secure. We've given away about 400 or so. So we are, there's a bit of a backlog in trying to get laptops and other things like hotspots. So we're trying to supplement what the institutions are already doing. Most institutions lent out their supply of laptops, and so we're supplementing what higher ed is doing. There's also the question around flexibility in admissions. So right now, the SAT and the ACT, that national test, is actually prescribed in statute that our institutions have to use those national tests as part of their admissions policy. And so since we know that they're not going to be taking those tests, we're seeking to get some flexibility from the legislature to see if we can get that flexibility so that institutions for at least these next coming semesters would not have to abide by, or we can have some flexibility and using multiple measures, and including GPA and rigor of the academic programming. We also have the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative. It's been going on for a few years now, and it typically will provide scholarships and wraparound services for students. But in this case, to respond to COVID-19, we're looking to take some of those dollars and apply it to displaced workers who might want to make a career change or get some upskilling. And so to provide them with some scholarship dollars as well as the wraparound services. And then we also are looking to get some flexibility around financial aid. And so as it stands, the financial aid package, if you will, is designated to work study and merit-based and needs-based, and so, and some for graduate programs. And we're looking to try to have the institutions have some flexibility on who they can give financial aid to. Lastly, Open Educational Resources is an initiative that we started not too long ago, a couple years ago, which assists in professors making the change from hard copy of textbooks and course materials to having all of that be online. It saves the student hundreds, literally thousands of dollars in textbook fees and textbook costs. And so we're looking to expand and scale the OER. So during this time of remote learning, students and faculty can put their materials online. Next slide. The CARES Act, and I believe that we're going to hear more from the Regent on the CARES Act, so I won't go into it too deeply. But as you can see, half of the money that the institutions receive in the CARES Act needs to go to students first. So that's financial aid for students. So I know this is geared a little bit towards CU Boulder, and I have the numbers right here. There's going to be about, for CU, just the CU Boulder campus, about $18.7 million. Half of that will be for the students. So that's going to students first, primarily in assisting need-based students who are low-income students. That's going to be the first tier. So, so students, don't fret. There's money coming to you as soon as we can get these CARE Act dollars. Next slide. We're also serving non-traditional students in the same way. So I don't want to go into each of those, we already did, but there are non-traditional students who are displaced, even workers who are displaced, who hopefully will become students. And so we're doing everything that we can as a state to care for our students, to make sure that there's financial assistance for them to continue their programming, make sure that they have the technology that's needed to continue their studies so that they can complete. That's the number one thing. And why is all of this important? Next slide. It's important because of the marketplace. And the next slide shows you that about 74% of jobs in Colorado require a credential. So it's critical that students complete their studies, whether it's a 2-year, 1-year certificate program or 4-year, that they complete it. So we want to do everything we can to help you complete your programming, earn your credential so that you are qualified for the jobs that are coming. After the Great Recession, This is what was required. 74% of the jobs, 96% of the really top jobs required a credential. We feel like the same thing is going to happen as a result of this great pandemic of 2020. So we know that there's a lot of unemployed folks right now. We need to make sure that they have a path and a line of sight to earning a credential. It's more important now than it ever has been to get that credential. So that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. The Department of Higher Education is working with the presidents and with the campuses to make sure that they are informed, make sure that they have the resources that's available to them. And we are in touch with our congressional delegation to make sure that they are working for us to get what we need to help our students persist and get the credential. So thank you for that. I have another meeting after this, so I'm not going to be able to stick around for questions. So if you have a couple of questions while the others are presenting, I should be able to answer a couple of the questions as it relates to the Department of Higher Ed. So,
Dr. Paccione, I want to interrupt real quick just to give you some lightning round questions. I'm watching in the comments or Q&A section. So do you have a link for the laptops? And then also the question is there an analysis of the 74% available seems too high? And if you want to answer those now or later, that's fine with me.
Sure. So if you go to higher ed, all one word, highered.colorado.gov, you'll see a link for no lapse in learning. And that's where the laptop campaign is. But go through your institution, let them know that you need it. And then they have asked us. And so we have a kind of a waiting list right now, but we're trying to fill that. That waiting list. We'll have about 300 more coming in the next week. So, so that's the place to start. And yeah, this 74% actually came out of the Great Recession. And so 74% of the jobs coming out of the recession required a credential. And we're seeing that even now, and you can find that information at the CWDC, the Colorado Workforce Development Council. So that's part of Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. So if you go to their website, you'll be able to see that. How much from CARES versus your loss? Woo, that will be the presidents and the CFOs will need to tell you that. CARES right now, we're looking to hopefully get another package, a fourth package to get some more funding because there will be a deep hole. Especially when you think about the loss, the potential loss of revenue this summer, summer camps and summer conferences, and institutions are they're gonna have a loss of revenue if this continues through the summer. So there's a lot that we're looking at.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Paccione, for doing that. And thank you for joining us as well. If you have any closing comments before you have to take off, feel free. But once again, we just really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And just know that we are a resource to the students, to the institutions, and to the legislature. We want to be, that's our brand. We want to be a resource to all of you as you consider what are the changes that need to be made and how can you persist to get your credential.
Thank you so much. And if we have other questions, we'll get back to you and then we can disseminate the answers later.
That sounds great. Thank you. And thanks for everyone who joined.
All right. Well, I'm just getting a quick text notice that we have a few technical difficulties. So thank you again, Dr. Paccione. So what I'm going to do while we're updating just a couple of technical things is make sure that the remainder of our panel is introduced, so our viewing audience knows who we're talking to today. And so we are joined by several people. CU Regent Jack Kroll from District 1. He represents Denver and he's now waving. So that's a good sign that he can hear me. We're also joined by Chancellor DiStefano from the CU Boulder campus. And then we also, proud to say that we have two people from the University of Colorado, two student representatives, one from CUSG and also another from their Legislative Affairs Department, and another, one of our tri-execs, correct? Yep. All right. I'm getting a smile there. So that's either I got it totally wrong or totally right.
You got it totally right.
Oh, good. And then last but not least, and this was certainly not an active omission, but an active commission that we're now fixing, which is we didn't look at what's happening in our community colleges, which are really the lifeblood not only of our higher education system, but also are a huge part to many of our large and small communities across the state of Colorado. And so we're glad to be joined by President Andy Dorsey, President of Front Range Community College. And so I want to thank all of you for being here. The other thing I'm going to do just to cue folks up while I'm literally stalling for time is just put a couple of the questions that we got over email for all the panelists to consider as they're giving their presentation. Some of these might be more geared towards CU issues more than anything else. My first question we got is, my son earned a significant academic scholarship at CU Boulder when he was enrolled as a freshman last fall. Will he still be able to get that? My son also qualified for other scholarships and grants in the past. Will those be continued? The other one is, will CU students still get access to their eco passes in Boulder? If they're obviously, President Dorsey, if you can answer that, if there's an eco pass thing similar for Front Range, that would be good to know. Will there be more options in the fall for students to select both virtual electronic learning classes as well as on campus, which I think Chancellor DiStefano will get to, as well as President Dorsey. And then if a parent or parents become unemployed, does anyone know how that will affect one's ability to obtain federal loans? So I know I'm throwing a lot of questions out there, and we're going to try and get to all of them.
Jonathan, I've got a little section about that. If a parent becomes unemployed and that affects loans, I've got a little section about that at the end.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, so we've got a sneak preview. So everyone's got to stay on until the end now. Another individual in Lafayette was asking, they're in a house with 3 current CU students. They're all logging in tonight, so I hope you can all hear us. A couple of obvious questions that are likely to be addressed, but just in case, what, if any, refund or credits are students getting for the current semester's tuition, fees, room, and board? Which I think will be covered. And then also, what is the current planning for fall matriculation and on-campus housing? Is there a chance move-in will be staggered, or classes kept to smaller sizes, or are there other accommodations being considered right now? The last one we got over email just a couple minutes ago, and this is probably more for CU Regent Kroll than anyone else. But this is looking at a faculty question. It says most of the faculty earn 1/10 to 1/20 of what the President Mark Kennedy earns. There's even greater disparity between football coaches and faculty. Are administrators and coaches looking at taking salary cuts before other faculty members are being considered to shoulder the budget burden? Which apparently is, according to this letter writer, saying is happening at Harvard and a number of other universities. Last part of that question is, if faculty teaching loads are increased, part-time faculty will be terminated. There will be fewer opportunities for grad students to teach or work in laboratories, thus contributing to the increased unemployment for our state. How should Colorado and CU respond to this reality? So that's for me and Rep. Jaquez Lewis as much as it is for anyone else. There's a few other questions out there, but hopefully that has taken care of part of our technical difficulties. And Tiffany, if we can go to the next slide and keep things going, that would be great. So now we have Chancellor DiStefano. Thank you again for joining us. We've got you on our for joining us tonight, and please start when you're ready to go.
Thank you very much, Representative Singer. And why don't we start with the first slide, or the second slide, I should say. I just want to say a couple of words about, we're all a part of what's happening globally. This COVID-19 is affecting everyone around the world. And my top priority as Chancellor is the health and safety of our students and our faculty and our staff. And that's what's going to drive decisions about the future. We've been working closely, as Dr. Paccione mentioned, in working with the governor's office to develop policies and protocols. We're still offering quality online and remote credits, fulfilling a mission that started over 144 years ago in Boulder. We work very closely with state legislators of Boulder County Public Health, the City of Boulder, and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to protect the health and safety. So we've taken many steps over the past weeks that I'll talk about to help contain the spread of COVID-19. Next slide, please. So the first thing we did is we asked students who were living on campus to return home if they were able to do so. 92% returned to their permanent homes to help curb the spread of COVID-19. And to answer one of the questions that came up, students who moved out of the residence halls will receive a prorated refund from the time that they're not on campus. And they will also be returned the $300 housing deposit, less any damage done to their rooms. Next slide, please. So all of our classes are taught remotely through Zoom or Skype, software, Canvas, the Campus Learning Online Management System. We do have technology guidance to students, and you can find that by going to our website, www.colorado.edu, and as soon as you hit that website, it will have questions, frequently asked questions and answers about COVID-19. We've asked faculty to allow students to make up exams and quizzes and turn in assignments after spring break. And we've allowed students to convert most of their spring courses, over 80% of their spring courses, to a pass or fail credit. Next slide, please. We also adjusted summer 2020 registration requirements for eligible graduate students who were initially planning to graduate in the spring and now may need some extra time to defend their dissertations or their final examinations. We suspended all non-essential campus research activities except where there's a critical risk of disruption, catastrophic loss, or animal care requirements. And we provided research continuity and technical and other guidance specific to the research community related to COVID-19. Next slide, please. We said that, and I know it's very disappointing to many of our graduates, that we will live stream the spring commencement on May 16th. And what we are doing is we're inviting the spring 2020 graduates to return to campus in May of 2021 for special events and recognition of their hard work toward earning their degrees. Our speaker, our commencement speaker, Dan Carlin, will deliver his address and we'll follow up with a welcome to our newest class of buffs. We know, and I know, that students have worked extremely hard and that we never will be able to adequately replace the loss of spring commencement that students have worked so hard to achieve. But we're eager to bring back students in better times to celebrate what they so richly deserve. Next slide, please. We created a website, and I mentioned that on www.colorado.edu, COVID-19 as a one-stop resource for campus updates. We're also disseminating targeted emails. We're updating our students and families in the parent and family newsletter. We're maintaining an active response and engagement presence on social media, staffing a dedicated call center when necessary. And we try to identify and address questions and concerns in real time. Next slide, please. So as far as support for student workers, we've guaranteed that student workers will continue to receive their wages through the end of the semester. We're also advising those who applied for 2020, 2021 financial aid and recently experienced a loss of income related to COVID-19 to wait until May 15th to submit an appeal to the Office of Financial Aid. So Representative Singer, that was another question that came up. After May 15, if parents would submit an appeal to the Office of Financial Aid, we would be able to help them with some additional financial aid if possible. And it's important for students to really tend to their mental health and wellness. And we're providing a central location for online health and wellness support. And again, it's going to that main website that I've been mentioning. Next slide, please. So Bus Together, we started this just about a week ago. We are matching, we have a $1.6 million in donations that we're using as a match so that our alumni, our friends of the university, our former students, all of them can come together and donate to this fund. And that way we can set up a special student emergency fund to help students in need pay bills, to lost wages, secure technology for remote learning, and gain access to healthcare. And a crowdfunding effort has been set up, and the initiative also connects buffs to volunteer opportunities. And I'm very proud of our students and alumni for taking a leading role in Buffs Together. And again, by going to our website, you can find out more about Buffs Together. Next slide, please. The BioFrontiers Institute and associated labs are donating research materials to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Boulder Community Health Foundation. We have volunteering through Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to assist with scientific and administrative support. We have about 30 to 40 3D printers on campus that we're using to create masks and shields for healthcare workers to fill the gap in the PPE supply chain. And CU Boulder researchers are providing valuable research in this fight against COVID-19. Next slide. And it goes to Jack.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chancellor DiStefano. I want to quickly remark that from the board's perspective, at least from my perspective on the board, I should put it that way, we've got some tremendous leadership on our campuses with Chancellor DiStefano in Boulder, as well as at the system office with President Mark Kennedy. And I want to thank Representative Singer and Representative Jaquez Lewis for putting this together and giving me an opportunity to update everybody. You know, this is a spooky time for all of us. I think every one of us knows someone who's been impacted deeply by this outbreak already. You know, my best friend got laid off from his job. I've got a really close family member who got a promotion and then lost his job. And you know, I just remain thankful for everything that I have right now. And I know that the university was here many, many years before I got here. It will be here many, many years after I leave. There will be some hard times along the way, but we're going to get through this together. I want to start by addressing two things that came up earlier in the conversation. First, Dr. Paccione's call out around testing flexibility for ACT and SAT, and just real quickly put on my university admissions office or university admission hat and say to Rep Lewis and Rep Singer, we absolutely need that flexibility. If we don't have that flexibility going into the fall of 2021, we're going to be in a really challenging place to create a process that's equitable. I know there was test optional legislation already on the table before things got wonky. But if that's something that you all can find the time to address, we would really appreciate it as we move forward. I know too that we have great leadership. Speaker of the House, Casey Becker's been a wonderful champion for CU and all of higher ed. And so we really appreciate her work and know that challenging times lie ahead, but we have good allies in the legislature for higher ed. So thank you for all of that. And with that, I do want to quickly address the question that came up around salaries for coaches and executives. You know, that's absolutely on the table. Rick George, our athletic director, has already gone to coaches and begun preliminary conversations around voluntary salary decreases for them. It's important to note those are guaranteed contracts. So that does put us in a bind, but I think people, when faced with the realities of this, will step up and do the right thing. I know that board members have asked too, of President Kennedy and others, what's the plan with respect to executive compensation? And the response has been, there's a lot of moving parts right now, but I don't think anybody's ruling anything out with respect to making the budget work. Everybody's going to have to give a little in times like these, but I know that CU will get through it together. And with that, we'll jump to the next slide. And I'm going to talk quickly now about some COVID-19 relief. Dr. Paccione said the budget for CU was about 18.7 million. Half of that has to go right now to students, and we're going to seek additional funding as we move ahead. I think we're already working on a second draft letter to Congress, and that's going to be asking for a much significant sum of money, about $47 billion for all of higher ed. And we'll go to the next slide. This is a really interesting note on current student borrowers. So if you've graduated and you're currently paying off your student loans, the CARES Act really gives you a lot of protection so that you can spend your household cash flows on other things. Right now, you're not going to have to pay any interest, and you're not going to have to make any principal payments, and interest will not accrue until September 30th under the CARES Act. So that's a really great thing for current borrowers. Note this probably will not cover any private student loans that you may be paying. Those agreements will have to be worked out separately, or any refinancing that you did of a federally held student loan into a privately held student loan. So this applies only to those loans that are held by the federal government right now, but it's still a very welcomed reprieve in times like these. Next slide. Borrowers who are delinquent on their payments also are having a reprieve. That's a huge boost right now for families. So it kind of falls in line with that payment freeze. We've also, the federal government, and this should be noted that this is the Federal Department of Education. I know we had Director Paccione on earlier from the State Department of Higher Education, but this is the Federal Department of Education, which is what this is referring to. And they are stopping any wage garnishments right now as well, in line with the thinking that we're not going to be accepting payments on those things. And we'll go to the next slide. So this is a really neat thing that anybody who's a younger employer out there, or employee, excuse me, and you're fortunate enough to have a job right now, I think everybody in the country right now is going to be putting promotions on pause, pay raises on pause. Certainly, we've had preliminary discussions around that, but nothing's final at CU. Right now, the federal government is giving certain employers, and we're still seeking some clarity on this, the opportunity to have a dollar-for-dollar reprieve on their payroll taxes to the federal government of up to $5,250 towards any employee student loan repayments. And so that's a win for the employee. The employer doesn't incur any additional expenses. And so if you're out there and you have the opportunity to raise this issue, please do so. I'm looking at it for CU to see if we can do that for our employees who have outstanding student loan debt, because I know the next few years are going to be challenging as we navigate the outcome of all of this. And this would be a great way for us to help offset, the potential of not missing out on some pay increases during that time. Next slide. So this is a slide that shows kind of where we're at in higher ed. I know Rep. Jaquez Lewis did a great job of teeing up the budget challenges at the state. This is really what happened after the 2008-2009 financial crisis. You can see right where that graph crosses was when the state went from paying a majority of a student's share of a higher education to the student sharing in that burden. And I want to thank, Governor Polis and his predecessor, John Hickenlooper. If you can look towards the far end of that graph, we saw it come down from 70 to about 64% in recent years. But the challenge is that, we've got to balance the budget. And right now in Colorado, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we are already one of the states that supports higher education the least in our country. And this has been a fact that Tabor really inhibits. And, if you're out there and you're active in the advocacy space, I really want you and others to educate yourself about Tabor. We don't have time to go into it right now, but effectively it caps well-meaning people like Rep. Jaquez Lewis and Representative Singer from really assisting our public institutions during times like this. And, you know, the only way I see us moving forward ahead with a really healthy funding base for higher education in this state is if we can get a specific tax revenue source to support higher ed. And again, we don't have time to go into all of that, but we'll go to the next slide here that kind of shows another example. You know, and this is one where I think we really need to give our administration some credit on. If you can look here, these are basically tier 1 flagship institutions for which we are in their peer group. And you can see the amount of funding that CU receives from the state, as well as what we expect students to make up for. And as you can see, we're on the far right end of that graph, which means not only are we getting not a lot of state support, but we're also not relative to these other institutions, really pushing too much on as far as a total cost onto our students, again, within this relative context. We know that it's challenging to finance a higher education these days. The administration has really done a great job, and this reflects the fact that we are getting a lot out of limited resources at CU. And so I just want to thank Chancellor DiStefano and all of his folks for that hard work. There's certainly more that can be done in this space, and certainly more we can continue to do to help make sure higher education stays affordable for all of Colorado's students. But there's been good work to be done, and we're going to have to find new and creative ways moving forward to keep up that good work. Next slide. Speaking of which, you know, we're kind of in a wait and see on the federal stimulus. I know that there's already talks of round 4 of federal stimulus. We're going to wait and see where the May 12th state budget revenue comes in, or the forecast, et cetera. You can probably expect to see a budget out of the CU Board of Regents no later than June. I don't see how we could go into the new fiscal year without one. With that, we'll go to the next slide and talk about our major federal advocacy. President Kennedy led a coalition of the campus chancellors, not only at CU, but across the state, to sign a letter encouraging Congress to support higher education in those areas below. We've talked about aid. We've talked a little bit about money to improve digital education offerings and open educational resources. We need low-cost borrowing windows for universities to continue to service their debt at a time like this, and supplemental research to help pay for leave for grant-funded employees doing research and research on COVID-19 monies. And I got one last slide, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to President Janine Davidson of Metropolitan State University. She led a coalition of university presidents, including Mark Kennedy, as well as our 4 campus chancellors, who really called for extended protections on DACA, permanent solution to DACA. This is really, really important. You know, I talk about the privileges that I have in this world, but I can't imagine what it would be like to be a student or a staff member at a time such as this, and having your DACA renewal kind of in flux, or maybe even being further undocumented than that. So this is the right call, and I really appreciate President Kennedy and President Davidson's leadership on this issue. And with that, I'm proud to kick it over to our wonderful CU Boulder representatives from the student body. They have some great updates for you. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us all, for having me and Ryan here. We really appreciate it. My name is Sarah Altshuler. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a junior here at CU. I've been involved with student government since my freshman year, and currently I hold the position of legislative president, where I oversee the legislative branch, the legislative efforts of student government, and I also help facilitate and oversee the budget process for the CU portion of student fees.
And hi, my name's Ryan Passas. As Representative Singer said earlier, I'm one of the tri-execs, also known as one of the student body presidents for CU Boulder. I've been involved with CU student government for 2 years now, and I work really closely with administration, and I oversee an executive cabinet of about 35 people.
Awesome. So just to tell you guys a little bit about what student government does and what we oversee, essentially, as Ryan said, we work with administration to ensure that student interests are communicated to administration, as well as we represent and oversee communications to cost centers, which are facilities that are operating on student fees. With the legislative branch, Currently, we have not really seen any changes in our processes. We're continuing to meet online at 5 p.m. on Zoom. If you want to access those meetings and be a part of that, you can reach out to me at my email, which is posted on our website, custudentgovernment.org. We have passed one piece of legislation that allows for our joint boards and advisory boards and any other operational kind of group that needs to facilitate and make sure we see changes and allows them to operate and vote over Zoom.
And for the executive branch, we have also transitioned to remote works following university protocol. So the main things that have changed a little bit is that we actually had our elections for the next student body president last week. So we'll be able to announce the official results very soon, which is very exciting. And then we just continue to work with administration and each of our departments in our cabinet, whether it be our Department for Diversity and Inclusion or our Student Engagement Department, have been continuing to meet with centers across campus to try to reach students in new and innovative ways. And then next slide. So real quick, we're going to go through each of the cost centers. So the centers that are funded by that student activity fee that we oversee, and kind of give a little rundown of how they have evolved to react to the COVID-19 crisis. So our first one here is the Center for Student Involvement. The Center for Student Involvement regularly works really closely with our student organizations, and they provide programming for students. As student life has transitioned online, the Center for Student Involvement has worked diligently to help students continue to connect to other students and find community through virtual programming. So some of their highlighted classes are their virtual art class, virtual tours of museums, virtual wellness Wednesdays, and zoo animal webcams. And then they're also helping connect buffs to the greater Boulder community through Takeout Tuesdays, which is a little bit of a social media campaign in which they're asking students to get takeout from local Boulder restaurants on Tuesdays, and then help share with their fellow buffs how they're helping out their local community during this time on social media using hashtag Takeout Tuesday. Additionally, they've moved 2 of their larger events online for the remainder of the semester. One of those is the Just in Time Fair. This is a job fair that is specifically focused at getting students full-time jobs during the summer or post-graduation. So this is now occurring online, and it can be found on CSI's website, Center for Student Involvement, which is at the resources page at the way end and on the bottom here. And then also Conference on World Affairs. I think this is one of definitely one of my personal favorite events that CU puts on, and one that we have the most community engagement with. So they're still hosting this. It's just going to be an online platform. A crowd favorite is the hardcore history section of the Conference on World Affairs, and this will still be occurring. So that's very exciting. And the next slide, please. Awesome. So next is our Volunteer Resource Center, which has been instrumental in addressing the evolving issues that students are facing due to COVID. Pandemic or not, the VRC always has worked hard to address food insecurity on our campus and continues to do so now. Their Swipe It Forward program and the invention of food bags have been innovative ways that the VRC has worked to address food insecurity in light of Corona. The Swipe It Forward program was developed prior to this pandemic, and the idea is that students can donate their meal swipes, and then students in need can apply for those and are given meal swipes based on a demonstrated need. So that actually started before the pandemic and now has become of great use during the pandemic. So students are continuing to receive donated swipes and are able to use them to purchase either a meal at one of the to-go stations at a dining hall or a food bag. The food bags were created by the VRC to create a safe way to transport food to students. The VRC is also continuing their normal support of helping connect students to opportunities for volunteering and helping out our community right now, which is available on that website right there. Yes, next page, thanks.
All right. So as far as you all know, due to COVID and social distancing, a lot of large community centers have been limited in the way that they can occupy space. That includes our very own recreational center. However, the staff over there has been working very hard to make sure that students can keep having a healthy lifestyle, mentally and physically. One of the ways that the staff over there has been working to serve students is by creating fit well virtual classes. So that includes a variety of different classes taught by rec center community instructors. And this is with the intention of creating community spaces for students to access online so that they can continue to be active even when social distancing. Some of these classes available are virtual intentions, meditation, yoga classes, glutes, core, and more, mat Pilates, and there are another variety of classes available to students. You can go ahead and access those classes at their website, which is www.colorado.edu/recreation. Next slide, please. Thank you.
So next we have our Office of Off-Campus Housing and Neighborhood Relations. So this office, since its conception, has worked tirelessly to establish relationships between CU and community stakeholders like local government officials, landlords, property management companies, and permanent community residents. During this time, the Office of Off-Campus Housing and Neighborhood Relations has been able to rely on these relationships to provide outlets to advocate for the evolving student housing needs during this time. Off-campus housing and neighborhood relations is also serving students through moving their off-campus living orientation to an online format. So this is a great opportunity for students to get engaged and learn how to be responsible community members, as well as learn the basics of living off campus. I would definitely recommend this to any student, whether it's their first time living off campus or they've been doing it for a couple years now. It definitely is always helpful to have a refresher. And there's a lot of Boulder specific information in there that's really helpful. And then lastly, something that's really exciting is that in the Office of Off-Campus Housing and Neighborhood Relations, we have Bruce Sarbaugh. He is an attorney that stays in that office a couple days a week and helps provide legal advice to students concerning leases or landlord-tenant disputes. So he is continuing to offer legal advice over the phone during the pandemic, and with housing insecurity on the rise for students, this is a really great place to turn when students are kind of getting into a hard place with the growing concerns with COVID. Next slide. Thank you.
And kind of continuing on that legal service, we also have another cost center, Student Legal Services, that works to help students through any legal processes that might be kind of coming up in their lives. Luckily and amazingly, we've been working towards moving this service online more and more. So if you go to the website and fill out an intake form, then you can actually access the services online. You can set up either a virtual meeting or communicate through the email. The center is great for connecting students to legal advice or representation, and you can access all that via the website. The next cost center we were talking about is the Environmental Cost Center. This was a cost center created for students by students regarding sustainability and kind of practices like that. Due to COVID, obviously a lot of shifts have been made, but the center is also working hard to continue providing services and areas for engagement for students. Already we've seen a Eco Center career conference, which was on April 1st and 2nd, and going forward for Earth Day, the E-Center is working hard to go digital. While the Presidential Sustainability Challenge has been suspended, the E-Center is working to connect students with the Boulder Sustainability Solution Challenge, which will continue to be held remotely. If you're interested in seeing any of the other services or projects that the E-Center is working on, you can go ahead and visit their website at the link below. And then last but not least, we have the KVCU Radio 1190. So this is our student news and radio station. So they usually work on DJing, mixing, and broadcasting from their live studio. However, the students, for again, social distancing and student safety, as well as community safety, have gone to different kind of platforms. So what's currently being done is if you look up their Radio 1190 website, you will see links connecting you to Mixcloud, which will set you up for different playlists, podcasts that the students are continuing to work together and put together for student enjoyment so that we can all continue having a fun experience with music.
And then we just wanted to conclude our part by reflecting a little bit on the student experience in the wake of COVID-19. First and foremost, we want to acknowledge for all the students watching that we understand and know that this has affected each one of us differently. And we want to thank administration, especially Chancellor DiStefano, as well as Regent Kroll, for recognizing that and continuing to adjust and evolve the policies of the university to best accommodate these growing and evolving needs that students are facing. Whether it was a decision to move to remote learning as quickly as we did, or to set up the Student Emergency Fund, I think it's become very clear that we're students at a university who continually prioritizes our health and safety and recognizes us as holistic people. And beyond that academic success, they're really looking at making sure that students have their basic needs taken care of. We also want to highlight for any students watching the importance of taking care of yourselves. So we ask you all to please continue to socially distance, and also to make sure that you're checking up on your mental health. As mentioned earlier, there will be resources at the end of this presentation on where to access mental health resources from the school, but it's really important that we keep up on that even as life has transitioned the way it has. But otherwise, we also want to recommend all students to check out colorado.edu/coronavirus. Might just be Corona, I apologize. Because all of the updated information is constantly being put on there, and just about any question you have can likely be answered on there from the university perspective, and if it can't be, please feel free to visit the CUSG website and ask us, because then we can bring it to administration's attention. I don't know if Sarah has anything to add.
Yeah, just reiterating that we hope that all the buffs out there stay happy and healthy. Again, student government is a great resource to kind of access information. We can point you in the right direction, or if we don't have the answer, we can go find it for you.
All right, I think I'm up next. I wanted to take a moment to also give some resources to faculty and staff, teachers out there. I think this was previously mentioned. The American Federation of Teachers has a foundation. They can actually help with technology, and they can give laptops to teachers. So if any of you are getting ready to transition and do remote teaching, they can help you with that. They also have printers for use at home. And then the loan forgiveness program, I wanted to mention this. If you are in the process of paying off a student loan, this organization really helps with coming up with ideas. If you're in crisis, if your income has changed and you're paying off a student loan, they have some great resources. So, and we will send these slides out. We'll put an email address that you can get it from Representative Jonathan Singer's Facebook page, my page. We can send these out. So next slide. Right now, Coloradans owe a lot of student loan debt. So I wanted to give you some additional resources on this. I found that the Student Borrower Protection Center, the SBPC, a fantastic website. They did a whole presentation to the community last week. I have those slides. I can make those available. They go into a lot of in-depth knowledge. And then if you are having trouble with working with a student loan servicer that is not federal, we heard about some of those resources. We passed a bill last year in the state legislature that we can help you with that. Now, student loan servicers are regulated in Colorado. So you can actually file a complaint if you have a servicer that's not working with you. So next slide. And if you are a student and you have become unemployed completely, you were working part-time, maybe you were a gig worker on the side, you can apply for aid, and this is the Colorado website. They have now opened up funds for folks that were self-employed, getting a 1099 part-time, so you might be able to get some assistance there. And then this is what Chancellor DiStefano was referring to. They have set up a fund on CU campus, but under FAFSA, they also will work with you. So if you have a parent that has lost income, you can go back and you can reapply for increased financial loan. This is where you should go for that. Next slide. And I always want to remind everyone to please fill out your census. That census information really helps us get additional federal assistance, monies, resources for Colorado. So please fill out your census form. And then this is my email. We can send out the slides. I know Representative Jonathan Singer can send them out too, but you'll have it all in one place.
All right, Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Representative Singer and Representative Jaquez Lewis. This is Andy Dorsey. I'm the president of Front Range Community College. Happy to be here tonight. Next slide. Just a little bit of background. I think folks often underestimate how big community colleges are across the state. There's about 130,000 students in community colleges. This year, we have about 18,000 students in our college across our 3 campuses, about 3,500 in Longmont. Across our sites, we have about 5,000 concurrent enrollment students too, where we do classes with high school students, which has been an interesting challenge in managing those classes as the high schools have gone online too. And a bunch of our programs are hands-on, whether that's emergency medical training or machining or automotive or welding or automation. And so that's really been an interesting challenge for us as we've thought to figure out how do we keep social distancing going in those kinds of programs. And just for another sort of order of magnitude, from our college, about 6,000 students transfer annually, whether that's to CU or CSU or Metro or other colleges in the state. Next slide, please. Can you hit the next slide, please? So Front Range has really done a lot of the things that I think Chancellor DiStefano mentioned before. We've moved most of our coursework onto remote learning. That's been a combination of online learning, video meetings like this one. And I think overall it's been positive. What's really struck me the most is about 80% of our students are working. Most of them are working at service jobs, and many of them have been laid off. We have provided about almost 1,200 students with emergency assistance. Comes from our foundation, from some money we had set aside for summer financial aid that we moved up, from an emergency assistance fund that we've been growing for a few years. But the need is much higher. And you know, one of the hard things is with the federal assistance package, a lot of our folks are classified as dependents with families that do not have a lot of income either right now. Their parents may have been laid off. So this is a challenging time.
My apologies. It looks like our presenter with the PowerPoint actually just got kicked off her internet.
No worries.
Which is why she wasn't ignoring you. It's the internet's fault. But I'll let you keep going.
I assume there were technical difficulties. I've been on enough of these to know that it's inevitable. So we're really working hard to figure out ways to support students moving forward. Dr. Paccione mentioned the 74% of folks in the state who will need some sort of technical certificate, and a lot of those come from community colleges. That 74% isn't bachelor's degrees holders. It's folks who need some kind of post-secondary training. And so that's our real challenge going forward. How do you do machining in a socially distant environment where really there's been a tremendous amount of demand for those students? We're going to largely be online in the summer, but working out ways that we can have, for example, 6 students in a welding lab at one time, and they can be socially distant, or 6 students in an automation lab, and they can be socially distant. I really want to thank the leadership of University of Colorado in promoting some of the outcomes of the CARES Act. That's been a lifesaver for us. We'll have almost $3.5 million we can distribute to students from that. And that will be sort of a big backstop for us in terms of the loss of state funding. So thank you to President Kennedy and the regents and for taking a lead on that. And we have a number of students who are DACA students and appreciate the push for making sure that we can support DACA students going forward. The Longmont community in particular has a lot of students who we see all the time who just blossom when they're given a chance to have an education. And many of them are taxpayers right now. So we're figuring out ways to move forward, and we have an active student government that's been working, certainly not as expansive as CU, but in trying to figure out how do we support students through this time, and appreciate all the support from the state. We know it's a tough time for you guys too. I don't envy you trying to close the budget gap going forward, so good luck with that. Thank you.
Jonathan, if you can hear me, unmute. Yeah, there you go.
Unmute.
Yep, there we go. Sorry, I unmuted myself because I'm getting a number of text messages that are coming through kind of loudly. So
Yes, and questions too. I think we're picking up on some of those online.
all right. Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and get those out for people the best way possible. In the meantime, I think what we'll do is I don't know if any of the people, our panelists here, have been looking at the Q&A, but if anyone wants to respond, if one particularly popped out for you, I know we said we're going to go till 7, but it looks like we've got a couple dozen questions here, and if anyone wants to answer any of them, just feel free to jump in, and otherwise I'll jump in with a few questions that I'm seeing here.
Jonathan, this is Phil DiStefano. If you don't mind, there were a couple questions you had at the beginning that about a student who had a significant academic scholarship when he enrolled as a freshman last fall. Will he still be able to get that? And also that her son has also applied for other scholarships. I'd like to address that. So students receiving CU Boulder merit scholarships have to meet certain renewal criteria to continue receiving their scholarship. And due to COVID-19, we've allowed for some leniency in the renewal criteria. And each of the college scholarships is different. But if the parent and or the student would look at www.colorado.edu/financial aid/COVID-19, they can get an update about renewing those scholarships for next year.
Great. What about the EcoPass question? We heard,
Yes, there have been no changes to the EcoPass.
Oh, and it looks like we're just about back up online, and our our community colleges not only get the short end of the stick in terms of the budget, but apparently also in terms of PowerPoint time as well. And so, but okay, there we go with some numbers and questions there. Anyone else wanted to respond to any of the questions that were in our Q&A box right now?
I just want to, because we have President Dorsey on the call with us, I just want to say that I think CU is doing a really good job with respect, not only with respect to pass-fail accommodations for our students, but we know that there's 6,000 students that are going to be transferring from Front Range Community College somewhere, and I think we're in pretty advanced conversations at campus levels about how do we accommodate those students. I think what we've been seeing and what I've been hearing from my role in admissions at CU is that we're going to really work well with our community college students to accommodate the hardships they've been put through and really reflect that in our admission standards, just as we will have to do in subsequent years with our first year class and additional transfers. So we really appreciate the partnership we have with you all, and I'm looking out for your transfer students when they come to CU. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
Go ahead, Andy. I can address my question in just a second.
All right. Yeah, just thank you. And, we've gone to kind of a pass-fail grading system. We sort of had to wait to make sure that all the four-year schools were doing that, but it's really for us, it's really the same thing. A lot of students have been thrown into a situation they didn't anticipate, didn't plan for, maybe weren't prepared for. And we appreciate the partnership with CU. It's really become much more robust over the last 3 or 4 years, working with provost office and admissions office. And so we appreciate that. I just want to respond real briefly to a question I saw about how do people access emergency aid at Front Range. We gave out all the aid we had, but we're just discussing today how we can put the next round of aid out there for students to apply. Hopefully we will have that out within the next 10 days. So, but right now it's not an option for the moment, but we're working on it.
Thank you for that. I wanted to make sure that we at least had a brief discussion on a question we got from Skylar, one of my constituents. What can we do to take a look at work study grant, minimum wage, $15 per hour minimum wage? Has there been discussions about that? Can anybody address that?
I think this, maybe Chancellor DiStefano might have some more to say on this front too. But what part of the conversations that we had around, and this was one thing we did with our affiliate and faculty and graduate students recently, is because when we boosted the affiliate or the graduate student pay significantly over the last few years, we went back also and we actually saw a 30% increase in our affiliate faculty salaries. And so if we change that same conversation down to the fight for 15 or whatever, if it's still going by that, that's not only something that we have to look at for our students on our campus, but also all of our staff that would fall under that. And I know that the campus has done a lot right now, and they're still continuing to look at what we're doing to help service our lowest income employees. We did a big push recently with a private company. It's a private-public partnership effectively that helps individuals with home down payments. So there's an assistance program there. And then we've also done something with parking passes for lower wage workers, but it's definitely a topic of frequent conversation at our Regent meetings and with the campus. So I don't know if Chancellor DiStefano, if you want to add anything else to that.
I would just add, as I mentioned earlier, that we're continuing to pay our student workers on campus, even though they've moved away, to make sure that they would get an income. And then as we plan for the fall, we will certainly look at what we can do from the standpoint of getting students employed on the campus through work study, which is a good way of our students. We know that if they're working on campus, they have a better chance of graduating in 4 years because they're working on campus rather than working in the Boulder community. They work with supervisors who are very sensitive about the students' time and exams and so on. So I would like to see even more of our students getting jobs on campus, either through work study or some other mechanism as we get back for the fall.
Great.
So we've got a few other questions here that I'm just looking for. Will the senior auditor program, Conrad is asking this question, senior auditor program at CU for seniors over the age of 55, I'm assuming that's referring to seniors in age and not in class tenure, be continuing with the fall semester? So is that over 55 program going to continue?
You know what, we've not discussed the senior auditors program, but I see no reason why we wouldn't continue with the senior auditors program as we bring back students and so on. The question is just the number of courses that we'll have in person versus the number of courses that we still may have to do remotely. But that's a program that's been extremely popular with our senior citizens 55 and over. And I'm certainly supportive of continuing that program.
Great. If there's no other thoughts on that one, I'm getting a question here from Jill, who's asking about out-of-state student support. this is a parent who pays out of state full load. And if we send our kids back, will they have medical support should they fall ill, and not just Wardenberg Center, but something more robust?
Well, I may have to get more information on that particular question, Jonathan, as we move forward in the next 3 to 4 weeks to look at options for fall semester. But again, from my standpoint, the health and safety of our students, it's going to be the #1 priority as we bring students back. So I appreciate that question, and I certainly will, work with our staff to get an answer to the parent who asked that question.
Great. Let's see. Well, this is, I don't know if we have a specific number on this. Karen is asking, how much total do you estimate the CU system has had to reimburse students this semester?
Oh, yeah. I think, Chancellor DiStefano, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're probably up to maybe 30, 35 million across the entire CU system. The bulk of that coming from your campus?
It's probably that much or a little bit more. I would say it's safe, probably in that, 30 to, $40 million range. But certainly we're collecting that information right now from all of the campuses. And, what we're looking at Boulder is, obviously what we've had to spend as far as reimbursements, but also what we've been able to save as well. And so again, we'll have, I would say a better number probably within the next month as the semesters wind down.
And I think it also we should point out too, not all institutions continue to pay their student employees too. So, we effectively kind of had a budget in place and we let it ride, and we knew that we would absorb that financial hit. And while we did share in some of the burden there, with respect to tuition and fees, and students are going to have to be, asked to be flexible with us on the learning environment within that they're in. But, the university, I think, stepped up as best it could to absorb as much of this financial shock as we could. So I definitely give kudos to the Chancellor and others on that.
All right, here's a student question. And so I'm going to let our student representatives try and answer this, but also if anyone else wants to jump in. Are there any considerations, wrong one, sorry, that is also a student question, but not where I was going. There was a mention of online classes being of similar quality as sort of live in-person classes. How are our students feeling about the remote learning situation right now? Is there any poll that's out there that's saying that these are of equal quality, or have these been evaluated in some way? So I'd love a personal response, but also, if anyone else wants to talk a little bit about the online learning experience as opposed to the in-person learning experience, I think that would be really helpful for everyone to hear.
Absolutely. And Chancellor DiStefano, if you have any other information, feel free to jump in. But to my knowledge, there are not a poll that we have created currently to really get insight. However, this has been one of the few times that I have had an email, instead of being flooded with emails from administration, it's absolutely flooded with emails from students, and they've been very vocal about this transition. And I think the best way to explain this transition is kind of twofold. First, for some students, it's different, and I wouldn't say that there's a lack in quality, but it's a different quality. So previously there was a lot of, interactive stimulation happening for students, and for some students that was a great way to learn. For other students, they're enjoying this a lot. For some students, they've always wanted to be able to take online classes through continuing ed, and maybe they're an in-state student, and those classes are more costly for in-state students to take online classes. So they're really excited to have this opportunity to finally take an online class, but at no additional cost. So I think the responses are varied. It's definitely a different education, but I don't think that we've suffered in the quality of education. All of our professors have been working very diligently to make sure that they're accommodating student need, and they're addressing the fact that the way that we learn it's transforming and that grading has to transform. We were really heartened at the announcement that CU is going to allow students to take a lot of their classes at a pass-fail rate. Students are learning differently, and that was a huge step in acknowledging that. So I wouldn't say there's any lapse in quality. And Sarah, you can feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so just like coming from, so I also double as the Arts and Sciences Senator for student government. So it's been interesting kind of seeing some divides across different fields. I think all of the departments are trying their best to kind of cope with these this switch to online classes. I think some departments are able to more easily adjust. I think I've heard a lot from the natural science students about kind of loss of labs, how that's particularly difficult because you're losing, you know, online building or experimenting settings. So those are going to be interesting questions that I think a lot of students are waiting for answers on how those experiences are going to be made up, and kind of some innovations on, depending on how long COVID continues, how are we going to adapt, you know, online learning services to kind of reflect some of those more in-person experiences that are a benefit, such as those lab experiences or classes that are very heavy in discussion and finding those best forums. So I would agree with Ryan. I think it's very diverse on the individual's kind of preferences, time management, accountability mechanisms, flexibility. But I think definitely most students have been pretty grateful that the administration and faculty have really been trying to be patient and understanding with students adjusting to this new learning environment.
And I also think I saw some questions pop up while we were discussing this, just kind of about what it's like to learn online now and how is, with technical difficulties happening, how this is adjusting. And not all classes have gone to Zoom. As Chancellor DiStefano previously mentioned, Canvas, which is our learning platform, a lot of lectures have moved actually to posting lectures on there and then having discussion posts where students can interact with other students, ask questions both to their professors and other students. Virtual, I've had virtual office hours. There's been a lot of different ways that professors have come up with how to accommodate students who now aren't in the Colorado time zone, who may be an international student that were able to go home, so they don't want to do a Zoom class that's going to be at 9 a.m. every day if that time no longer works for them. So class has changed. It's been a lot different, but I think that professors at CU have been extremely innovative in how do we keep up the quality and help students learn and help students interact with each other and still have the community of a classroom when they are learning remotely. And I think that's been really heartening. So I just wanted to add that.
You know, can I just jump in and say, it's interesting, at community colleges, I think students were probably a little bit more used to online learning. About 40% of our students were taking an online class at any one time. Most of them mixing online and on campus because so many of them were working. And that, I think, gave us some advantages in terms of students being used to the mode and having a pretty robust set of online classes that we could build off of. But it's still an adventure pretty much every day, as folks who weren't teaching online or students who weren't thinking about becoming online students suddenly were forced into that. We had about a week's notice, and so a lot of our faculty spent that week really working with students and trying to prepare them for it. And it worked a lot better this semester, I think, because there were already some personal relationships built for folks who really wanted that kind of touch. They had it. I hope that we're able to run classes on ground in the fall, or at least partly on ground, because for some students that personal relationship or actually seeing the professor really is helpful. And for some students, it doesn't matter. Really well done online classes work really well for a number of folks. And I think, you know, this semester has been a time when so many faculty have really pushed their own creative limits. And I'm really blown away by how creatively they've worked to make good experiences for students. I'm sure it's the same at CU. Not probably the same as they would have done if they had 3 or 4 months more to prepare. But sometimes, you know, the legislature is probably in the same boat right now, I'm guessing. So, but I really have to give kudos if any of them are listening. Just thank you.
So
All
we
right.
just, I just had one question come in. Is there one place that students can go to? Maybe, I'm not sure who can answer this, maybe Chancellor DiStefano or one of the students. Is there a place where if students are having trouble with a specific teacher, either not being able to get the presentation course materials out, or maybe the technology is not going so well, is there a place they can go?
Yes, so on one of my earlier slides, and what we'll have to do is get the website, and we can send that to the individual or send that to anyone who wants it. But there is a help desk that students can go to if they're having difficulties with their technology. So our IT services on campus have just been great in doing that.
Great, thank you, Chancellor.
And Jonathan, I have another Zoom call at 7:30, so I may have to sneak off at 7:30 for another one.
Well, that's okay. We're going to try and wrap this up by 7:30. We don't want to get in the way of people's dinner plans. And I'm just not talking about myself selfishly here. So, another question we got from an anonymous attendee, and they were asking about, there we go. Are there considerations for students trying to register for summer classes required for graduation? And this is what the anonymous attendee is saying. So if our student representatives can respond to this too, that would be good to, I'm assuming they're talking about CU, I don't know. Advisors are unavailable, teachers don't have schedules, and no extension time is evident. So for folks trying to register for summer classes required for graduation, what's the situation with advisors and setting up a schedule at this point? And that
So
may...
Yeah,
Yeah.
so all of our advisors are working full time. They're working remotely, but they're working full time. What I would advise is if a student, and I'm not sure if it's undergrad or a graduate student, but the first thing is to email his or her advisor because summer registration is ongoing right now. And we have close to 4,000 students that have already registered for summer. And so I would advise the individual to contact his or her advisor and start from there. The advisors are working, they're advising on summer classes, especially for those seniors who are going to graduate.
Okay, next question. Has there been discussion regarding the increasing teaching loads for tenure track and instructional rostered faculty?
No, we've not had discussions about increasing teaching loads for fall semester at all. What we're in the process of doing right now is looking at what fall semester is going to look like from the standpoint of some classes possibly being by remote, other classes being on campus. My goal is to have as many students back on campus that we can, given my priority of the health and safety of our students.
All right, if students are having a hard time with specific teachers being unresponsive with the presentation of course materials and assessments are not going so well remotely, where can they go?
We did that one, Jonathan.
Oh, did I totally miss that?
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. We have the help desk that can help them with that.
Great. Okay. Yeah. My apologies.
That's okay.
My assessment's not going to go so well after this. So, so we're getting a lot of thank you notes here from folks just appreciating just appreciating what's going on here. We've got about 4 minutes left, and so rather than try and get through the remainder of the questions, I wanted to give any of our presenters, if there's anything that you've left out and wanted to mention, or things that you just wanted to get out there for folks, I wanted to give any of our folks. I'll start with Phil, but Chancellor, anything that you wanted to add as a closing remark or thought?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity, Representative Singer, to participate this evening and to answer as many questions as I could, but please, you'll see more questions by contacting Heather Rutzko, who is our Assistant Vice President for State Relations, and her email address, and then she'll get questions to me. So thank you again, and thanks to the other participants.
Andy, any closing remarks, or President Dorsey, any closing remarks?
Well, yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I've got on the screen the email address of our Dean of Student Affairs at our Longmont campus, and she can solve every problem you have. No, not really, but she can get she can get you to the right person, whether that's me or somebody else. We're like Chancellor DiStefano, focused on how do we move forward in as safe as way possible. Our goal is to get as many classes back up and running in fall, especially our hands-on courses in Longmont. We've got Center for Advanced Manufacturing that we've opened relatively recently, and one of our main focuses is how do we get people to be able to safely work in environments like that so they can get trained and meet the needs that the state has. And we're just going to have to keep watching and making sure that we adapt. This has been probably the biggest set of adaptations in a short time that I can recall. And thankful for our friends at CU for being supportive of our students along the way too.
And Regent Kroll, any closing thoughts or remarks?
Yeah, just reiterate my thanks to Rep. Jaquez Lewis and to you, Representative Singer, for putting this on and getting the word out to the community. You know, challenging days are ahead for us at CU, but we're all going to get through it together, and you know, we'll take it one day at a time here.
And I'm going to give our two students the last word, but Rep. Jaquez Lewis, any closing thoughts or remarks?
Yeah, we've got our contact info up there. Thank you all. The panelists, you are incredible. Really appreciate it. And if we've missed something, you can email us and we'll try to do the best to get you an answer.
Yeah, and for anyone who's registered online through Zoom and registered your email address, we'll be doing our best to respond to the questions that we didn't get to, or if you feel like we didn't effectively respond to them today or as thoroughly as you would like, we can always do that. My contact information is up there as well. Once again, my special thanks to Meha and Tiffany for getting the technical back end of this up and running and really getting a really smooth process in a really tough time. The only closing words I'll have to say is thank you everyone for just working harder to take care of each other, and we'll keep doing these online town halls on new topics as they go. And to our tri-exec or to our student government rep, I'm gonna give you guys the last two words.
Thank
Awesome.
you so much. First, I just wanted to correct myself earlier. As this was going on, I got an email that the just-in-time career fair actually already happened, so I apologize for falsely disseminating information. However, Career Services is still hosting drop-in appointments and scheduled appointments. But anyway, we just wanted to say thank you for including student voice in these discussions. We're always so heartened to see how our local government, as well as administrations, both from our campus and from Front Range, are willing to hear students and willing to connect with their communities to see how everybody's dealing with this evolving pandemic. So thank you. We're really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate Ryan's point. Thanks so much for including us in these conversations.
Well, you're our future and you're gonna pick my nursing home eventually. So with that, we're gonna close it out right now, but please don't hesitate to email me, repsinger@gmail.com, and I'm gonna go feed a hungry family now.
Thank you all.
Thank you, bye.
Stay safe out there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.